Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about the trilogy of Sinbad films that Columbia released over a quite leisurely 20-year period. The first film was 1958's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, a title that would probably never get the green light today. What if people thought it was the seventh movie in a series? No one would go see it. People are smarter than studio executives tend to believe, in my opinion. In any case, the film sees the heroic Sinbad tasked with retrieving a piece of the shell of a roc's egg. A roc is a giant bird, not a lump of stone. And this item is needed to remove a curse on the beautiful Princess Parisia, but alas can be found only on the island of Colossa, which is overrun with giant monsters. Fortunately, Sinbad has the aid of the wizard Sakura in his quest. Unfortunately, Sakura is secretly the one responsible for the curse on the princess in the first place and has secret plans of his own. A full 16 years later came the Golden Voyage of Sinbad, in which a rather less goody two-shoes, more rascally version of Sinbad stumbles across a strange amulet that grants him an even stranger vision. Pursuing this mirage, Sinbad learns that the amulet is one of three keys to the fabled Fountain of Destiny on the lost continent of Lemuria. Anyone who takes the three keys to the fountain will receive youth, a shield of darkness, and a crown of untold riches. Our hero, of course, agrees to seek out the fountain, though his search will be contested at every step by the evil wizard Kura, who desires the fountain's power for himself. And then finally came 1977's Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, where Sinbad is tasked with breaking a magical curse on a prince instead of on a princess, and continuing this gender-flipping theme, the evil wizard in the movie is instead an evil sorceress. But otherwise, you can basically copy and paste the plot of the first two movies and you've got the plot of the third film. So, although nominally a trilogy, there's actually very little to connect these three films. As a franchise, they're something like an even less connected James Bond. Like in Bond, the main character has the same name and basic function. In this case, he's a daring Arabian sailor, but is portrayed by different actors, has a somewhat different personality, all those sort of things. Now, the casting change is probably inevitable between the first two of these films, what with there being a 15-year gap between them, but it was repeated for the third film as well. Also, like most Bond films, and there are a few exceptions, such as Diamonds Are Forever, each movie in this trilogy, quote-unquote, is a wholly self-contained story that does not acknowledge any of the events of the preceding films. Sinbad gets a new romantic interest in each of them, though it has to be said that unlike Bond, he's not a wildcat propositioning everything that moves. Despite the lack of narrative connections between the films, however, they definitely share some common features, so let's discuss them. So starting with the primary reason that you'd want to watch any of these movies, which is the justly famed stop-motion animation of Ray Harryhausen. Although he was already an Oscar winner for his contribution to the effects work of 1949's Mighty Joe Young, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad was Harryhausen's first colour film, and he certainly rose to the new challenge. A sword fight scene that he constructed between Sinbad and a stop-motion skeleton proved so popular with audiences that Harryhausen recreated and expanded the scene 5 years later, creating the now famous skeleton warrior fight from 1963's Jason and the Argonauts. Harryhausen would continue to produce other exceptional elements in later films, even if the overall standard was somewhat more uneven in some cases. For instance, while some effects in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger lack the richness of character that Harryhausen usually conveyed, the baboon animation in that film was so good that many people in the audience of the time were fooled into thinking that a real animal had been used. Now, modern audiences will not be taken in this fashion, but still, it's an impressive testament to Harryhausen's skill. Now, I've already mentioned that Columbia cast three different men in the title role, and rather alarmingly, they seem to have got it wrong on all three occasions. Kerwin Matthews gained the title role in the first movie, thanks to a credible performance in an earlier film by producer Charles Schneer. Now, I find Matthews a bit underwhelming in this role, though to be fair to him, the version of Sinbad that he's being asked to play is so blandly one-dimensional a hero, it would be a tall order indeed to make him interesting. Matthews does a better job in the 1962 offering Jack and the Giant Killer, even though that film is in pretty much every other respect an inferior knockoff of this one. Second time out, the lead went to John Philip Law, who is perhaps best known for playing the blind angel Pygar in Barbarella. He's probably the best of the three, profiting from a script that makes Sinbad more roguish and rakish. But despite the film's commercial success, his career seems to have trended sharply downwards afterwards. He moved to working in European cinema in the second half of the decade, perhaps a contributing factor he's not returning for the third film. By the 1980s, he was a regular in low-budget schlock like Thunder Warrior 3. That's an actual movie, by the way. Saving the worst for last, we come to Patrick Wayne's starring role in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. Playing opposite the nearly as bland Jane Seymour, the Duke's second son proves to entirely lack his father's screen presence, with producer Charles Schneer ruefully admitting, "Pat did the best he could, but frankly, he was only adequate. We had him grow a beard and he looked fine, but as soon as he opened his mouth, we were in trouble." It's probably cold comfort to Wayne that an even better action would probably have struggled to make Sinbad compelling in the rather weak story that particular film offers up. Finally, for fans of classic Doctor Who, both of the 70s film offer a performance of interest. The antagonist of Golden Voyage, the Wizard Akora, is played by Tom Baker, and is in fact the role that won him the keys to the TARDIS. Baker had already been recommended to Who producer Barry Letts to take on the role of the Doctor, but Letts specifically singled out the actor's performance in this film as the one that convinced him Baker was right for the part. Now, Baker would, of course, go on to spend a record 8 years in the TARDIS, becoming the most iconic of the 20th century Doctors, and possibly inadvertently poisoning the chalice for those who came after him. Eye of the Tiger, meanwhile, features Patrick Troughton in a major supporting role. Troughton's run as the second Doctor is actually my favourite of the classic era, but unfortunately by 1977 his personal history of smoking and continued enjoyment of drinking had rather sapped his physical health. His energy levels in this movie, which would be his second to last big screen outing, though he continued to work in TV right up until his death, are certainly not up to those of his run on Doctor Who. But, if you're a fan of classic Who, it's fun to see him here as well. Now, for those who don't have memories of olden day British TV to catch their interest, the prime selling point of these movies is, as I've already mentioned, Ray Harryhausen's effects. Look, they're no match for today's CGI extravaganzas, of course, but the ambition and detail of these labour-intensive effects genuinely deserves the star billing it received in each of these movies. Next time, well, not every film can enjoy Ray Harryhausen's special effects, and a case in point is the 1964 science fiction creature feature, The Creeping Terror. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.